Good afternoon, everyone. Just going to give it a couple more seconds before we kick off, just so that people can join. Okay, well, let's just get today's webinar started. So, thank you firstly for joining our first webinar of 2026. We're going to start off this year's webinar series with just a kind of base overview of, what's happening this year, if there's any VAT rate changes that you need to be aware of, and also kind of what markets may be good to kind of grow into or look at when looking at scaling your business this year. Just as an introduction for those who have not watched one of our webinars before, my name is Liam. I am one of the Senior Business Development Managers and Partnerships Manager here at Simply VAT. So I will be basically able to talk to you today through all of these lovely changes. Just before we kick off, there are some house rules. So obviously, firstly, please do just ask away any questions in the comment section. We are going to do a bit of a Q&A session toward the end of today's session. Once we kind of get to that point, I'll go through any questions. If there's anything that we, think needs a bit more attention, we'll contact you after today's webinar, or if we can't get round to them, then we'll contact you later as well. This will be able to be watched on demand also, so it will be accessible for on-demand viewing after the webinar ends, and our team will be sending you out that to watch on demand. And yeah, please do feel free to obviously, sign up for any future webinars and our newsletter to kind of know when we are going to be launching these. So just to see what we're going to be covering over today, we're going to be looking mainly obviously at the VAT rate changes and what impacts those have, any kind of emerging global markets, the anti-greenwashing compliance, and the carbon border adjustment mechanism. Firstly, will be the VAT rate changes. So there's been quite a few different things that are going to be changing this year, as you can kind of see here. So with Austria, there have been changes with feminine hygiene products and contraceptives. These have now been reduced to 0% VAT, which obviously is great news if you're going to be selling those moving forward. And then in Cyprus, there was a 0% VAT rate on essential goods, essentially, that was brought in, I believe, in May 2023. That includes, but not exclusive to, kind of milk, bread, coffee, vegetables, eggs, etc. And this will now be extended. They haven't put a kind of deadline on this, to my knowledge, but it's going to be extended through this year. In Denmark, there looks like to be, yeah, it's just going through some final approval stages, but it looks like the VAT rate on books, printed books, will drop from 25% to 0%. And in Finland, there's also a reduced rate will go down from 14% to 13.5%. That's typically going to be on food, transport, accommodation, medicines, books, kind of cultural sports activities. So if you are, again, selling in kind of a reduced rate in Finland, then please do just make sure you're now charging the correct amount of VAT to your end consumer. In Germany, there's rates drops on meals that would eaten in a restaurant. So that's going to be from 19% down to 7%. So a massive 12% kind of drop within that at the moment moving forward. And then there's a few changes happening in Lithuania. So the kind of accommodation, transport, cultural activities are going to go up from 9% to 12%. And books are going down to 5%. I believe that is based on kind of physical books. But yeah, just if you are going to be selling those, as mentioned with other kind of markets, just make sure you're now charging the correct rates, especially on those ones for accommodation transport, as the VAT rate has now increased rather than obviously having a decrease moving forward. Again, in the Netherlands, there's going to be a rise to 21% on the VAT on accommodation. So again, if you are kind of operating any kind of accommodation within Netherlands, just make sure you will be kind of looking to charge that 21%. The other thing with that is obviously if you are with any kind of accommodation or if you're kind of, incurring business expenses, obviously just be aware that the VAT rate will now increase. So if you do look to reclaim those VAT at a later stage, which you can do for a 13th directive webinar that we're going to be focusing on actually in next month's webinar, that you can then kind of get that back, and it will be a little bit more that you can obviously then reclaim. In Portugal, the standard rate for the art sector remains at 23%, and 6% of that will be for direct artist sales. In Sweden, VAT on food will be temporarily cut from 12% to 6%, so reduced by half. And that's going to be from the 1st of April until the 31st of December 2027. And then finally, in Switzerland, the standard rate is rising from 8.1 to 8.8%, and that also will affect accommodation. So that's going from 3.8 to 4.2, and reduced goods go from 2.6 to 2.8. So all of those changes are going to be rising within Switzerland. So again, if you are going to be in that market, just make sure you've now accounted for that increase within those kind of VAT rates that have now gone up. There's other things. So jumping on to the next one, obviously we're going to be looking at kind of reasons why you should look to expand into the EU. I know probably after that slide, some people may be thinking, the rates have gone up, but obviously the EU is a massive market, and, there is great kind of opportunity for expansion within those markets as well. So if we're looking at a few, main reasons as to why you should be looking to expand, firstly, obviously, the EU is the largest economy in the world, if I can find my words today. The EU has almost 450 million consumers. So, great market, really wide variety of different kind of areas that you can sell it into as well. So, really good for scaling your business moving forward. And then it's also always growing with the e-commerce revenue. So the e-commerce revenue in the EU increased 7% to 819 billion in 2024, and that's just going to keep on rising. It's also a secure and open investment framework, so everyone has access to fair conditions, wider markets, and business growth. And when businesses thrive, so does the EU. Obviously, EU free trade policies offer an environment of sustainable development. And there's a wide range of popular marketplaces. So obviously you've got Amazon, you've got the Amazon Pan-European program, which is really great when you're looking to scale your business. But you've also got other marketplaces which are quite popular in other kind of member states. You've got Bol, which is focused around the Netherlands, and you've got Allegro, which is, I believe Poland and also Romania, as well as a few other kind of member states within the Eastern European kind of side of Europe. So there's loads of different opportunities for you to kind of scale your business and not just kind of primarily focus on that Amazon growth, especially if you're making that investment to kind of grow in. You can look at kind of what other markets are available to you. Following on from that, obviously, if we look at Allegro and also maybe Zalando as the marketplaces, they're quite popular when you're looking at selling in different categories, but main kind of areas that I would typically see a lot of kind of clients looking to scale internationally grow on is kind of clothes and cosmetics. And they are always popular. In 2023, 44% of EU consumers ordered clothes online, which was up on 2% for two, and that has been increasing year on year as well. So obviously that is a couple of years ago now, but it has since grown. And the EU has more shoppers every single year, obviously, as you can see from kind of previous areas that we've spoken about just on this kind of slide. And it just keeps growing further and further. And 2024 was the ninth consecutive year that the market penetration rate for e-commerce in Europe has grown. With the kind of average revenue per EU shopper, that's also looking to grow. So each year, it looks like people are spending more and more on kind of online shopping. I think as we've kind of seen it, people are moving off the high street and going online. It's quite easy, obviously, as we all know, to just sit there late at night on the sofa and just end up with many Amazon packages coming the next day. But yeah, there's kind of different areas for you to kind of look at and scale within the EU in that area. And EU shoppers do often kind of shop cross border. So 53% of online purchases were from international sellers. And finally, you've got the great schemes which are for the iOS and OSS, and they allow kind of simplicity of cross-border sales, especially for those kind of non-EU established businesses that are looking to kind of grow their sales within 2026. So, just going to look at kind of some e-commerce trends that we can watch out for as we move into the 2026. We've got quite a few different trends that we've kind of recently noticed and appear kind of on the market. So the first kind of ones to look at would be hyper personalized shopping. So as we all know, AI is really kind of increasing, and that does just go through, you know, different areas, and it's definitely apparent within kind of the e-commerce community. With kind of the hyper personalized shopping, it's AI driven real time like personalization. It kind of boosts conversion and relevance, as we all, I guess, have seen, or if you've got any kind of form of social media accounts, you may see a lot of kind of like personalized ads. So that's definitely something that we've seen a trend, and I mean, definitely catches me out sometimes because I have been known to kind of look at those ads and click and buy. So it definitely does work. And with kind of the AI as well, looking onto like AI agents, we've seen a lot of kind of like AI looking at handling product discovery, comparison, and also like help with product and purchase decisions. So it's looking at optimization for the AI shelf, and it's becoming essential kind of moving forward. As we've also, previously mentioned, social commerce expansion is also growing in 2026. Obviously, looking at likes of like TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, they have become kind of primary shopping channels. As we all know, TikTok Shop has grown massively over the last couple of years, and it will continue to grow, obviously, as we proceed through the rest of 2026 and I'm sure into 2027 as well. The other area that we're obviously seeing is mobile first dominance. So 59% of e-commerce transactions typically occur on a mobile. So making sure that your kind of website and, shopping experience is user friendly on kind of, mobile interfaces, it just helps accelerate those sales and also looks, to streamline your customers' end experience. Also, looking at kind of like omni channels, customers need 8 touch points before buying. So it just allows a bit more seamlessness between cross-channel integration, and that is critical to make sure your customer feels, I guess, a bit more kind of taken care of within their journey whilst looking at checking out on your website. The other thing as well that we've seen quite trend, I'm sure we've all probably seen it on Amazon, especially over the last maybe yeah, I'm definitely more so prominent over the last 6 months, but there's a lot more products that are becoming available on same day and, very hyper fast fulfillment. So having really fast delivery is an expectation that is definitely been set through 2025 and will continue through 2026. I mean, it is quite handy when you're kind of sat, there in the morning and you're able to order something same day, as you can tell as well, not just kind of looking at say kind of Amazon or marketplaces, but even on say Uber Eats, for example, you can now get your shopping delivered literally just on a click of a button rather than having to kind of book a delivery slot. So that is something that we will typically see to grow more through 2026. And I would definitely just make sure that you are, ready to kind of take on that delivery moving forward. Another area that we're seeing, I definitely think it's really grown, especially in the last few years, but it's sustainability and ethical e-commerce. So obviously looking at kind of transparency, eco-friendly, ethical practices, that is something that we see a lot of consumers being really, really conscious of. And definitely is something to kind of keep in mind when looking to scale your business, especially in kind of certain markets. There's a few kind of member states, for example, like in Germany, where there is kind of recycling registrations needed. So they are quite keen on like eco-friendly packaging and all that kind of stuff moving forward. So that is something to take into consideration as you're looking to scale further. With the AR and VR, it's kind of visual search growth. So shoppers are adopting virtual try on, AR previews, and image based search. I mean, when we kind of look at that, I don't know whether this will spring to anyone else's mind, but it just reminds me of Clueless when Cher was looking to kind of, make her shopping on a tablet. And that is something that has definitely become transparent and is showing now in a lot more kind of virtual try-ons. We've all been on IKEA where we can literally, pop our phone screen and just pop it to the side of the room, and you can then see what that product will look like in your living room. So I think that's also something that's another key trend, as well as obviously looking at the image-based search on that. So people um, I'm definitely guilty of it myself. As you can tell, I'm definitely one of these people that are influenced by all these trends, but it's definitely looking at, you find someone has got a really nice kind of cabinet. They will then take that and then pop that in Google and you can do the image search. So that is another trend that is definitely driven through kind of, especially the last couple of years. And I think will continue to grow through 2026, 2027. The other areas, just to kind of keep looking at this, will be kind of membership style subscriptions. So subscriptions involve into value rich membership ecosystems. So acquisition costs up 6% and retention becomes essential. If you've got a really key product, I know it's very kind of common within, say, health and supplements, beauty. They definitely will then keep looking and to keep buying if you have that kind of membership style subscription, especially if the product has great ratings. So it's all about kind of that word of mouth. And again, it's a trend that we've seen quite a lot over the last few years. I just, for example, I can think of a few kind of like vitamin products that I've seen, advertised through social medias, typically on Instagram as well. And also, a lot of like skincare, because as we've kind of discovered and discussed, a lot of people are looking to move away from the high street. So just by having that ease of it arriving at your door is definitely something that we are seeing a trend to watch out for within 2026. Another big thing, which I think we've all seen, especially within the e-commerce community, but it's kind of flexible and frictionless payments. Buy now, pay later, wallets, biometric checkout, reduced barriers, and also cart abandonment. We've all kind of looked at, buy now, pay later in the past. Obviously, you've got a few big players on the market. And then also with biometric checkout, for example, like Apple Pay, again, goes back to mobile first dominance. It's really, really key to make sure that your website is set up for different areas. Obviously, I know some kind of brands aren't kind of keen on that buy now, pay later, but it is something we are seeing more people lean towards, especially around those kind of peak periods where you are looking at, say, the holiday season. You've got a lot to buy. You might utilize that, avenue to pay for that. So there may be a few areas to just keep in mind, especially through those kind of peak areas of your business. The other last couple of things that we're just going to look at through the trends, it would just be that zero party data strategy. So privacy first approaches shift brands to collecting voluntary customer provided data. And then cross-border commerce surge. So improvement of logistics and global marketplaces expand international sales. So it is, going back to that previous, why we're looking to expand into the EU. You've got so many different marketplaces available. There's so many different consumers out there that you may not be aware of and, that are looking for your product. So it's just about trying those markets and making sure your brand has the most different avenues available for success moving forward. So I'm just going to take a very quick sip of water and then we'll look at the anti-greenwashing compliance. Perfect. Okay, so with anti-greenwashing, what does this actually mean? So it ensures all sustainability related claims are fair, clear, and not misleading. So it's a core expectation under the UK FCA's anti-greenwashing rule. It requires brands to back environmental claims with verified, sustained evidence. So avoiding kind of vague or unproven statements. If you're looking to say you're reducing this, you just got to show that that is actually what your company is doing to bring your product to where it is. So if you're planting trees, for example, just making sure that you are looking to actually plant those trees rather than just saying that just to use it as like a buyer's tactic. And then also looking to strengthen consumer protection by preventing misleading green marketing and improving clarity of environmental information. So again, kind of just what we were saying about the one before. Looking at, why does anti-greenwashing compliance matter? It's a regulatory risk, so there's significant fines for misleading, you know, greenwashing claims. It can be up to 25 million enforcement in Europe. So there is, a massive risk there. So it's just making sure that you're very clear to your consumer what your product is, what your kind of sustainability and ethical message is moving forward. It also helps with market trust, so it builds credibility within the market and can really help you stand out. And it is also required by law, so EU, UK, and global regulators introducing stricter frameworks within kind of, the anti-greenwashing space. So, if we're looking at what anti-greenwashing compliance actually involves, it substantiates all claims, so back up any statements with solid third-party data, as we've kind of previously discussed. Also, being transparent, making sure the methodology, data sources, and what the sustainability of your product actually means, and use plain specific language. So avoiding vague terms, as we've already discussed, kind of just being very, very specific about what this product is and what you're looking to kind of achieve through this moving forward. Also, just making sure you're reviewing your marketing and your packaging before kind of putting that out there into, the general market, just making sure that it is compliant with any areas that, just to avoid those fines, and just implement internal compliance frameworks. So establishing kind of internal review processes across kind of marketing, product, legal, just make sure all the environmental messaging is compliant moving forward. And finally, just before we pop onto the Q&A section, we're going to be looking at the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is something that has been newly introduced from, I believe, towards the end of 2025, especially through 2026. So, what is the CBAM? So, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism is the EU's new carbon border tax designed to put a fair price on carbon emissions embedded in imported goods. So, carbon intensive goods ensures imports face a carbon cost equivalent to EU producers, preventing kind of cheaper, high emission goods from undercutting the industry within the EU. As why does it exist? As we've kind of discussed, it prevents that carbon leakage, um, levels the playing field, so it doesn't make it as competitive for those within the EU to kind of the non-EU producers, and it also drives global decarbonisation by incentivizing cleaner production methods abroad. So it's new reporting from the 13th of January 2026. It moves from a reporting only system to a full regulatory enforcement, and importers must begin complying with all financial and administrative obligations. So just to summarize kind of what that change will involve, it will look at real payments, certificates must be purchased and surrendered, declarations become mandatory and annual, and licenses are required to import any covered goods. Emissions reporting also will become more stricter and more technical. Okay, so we are now going to jump into kind of a Q&A session. Obviously, as mentioned, if you have any questions, I know that was a lot of information, but we are going to be sharing that through. But if you have any questions, feel free to just pop any in the comments section. I can see we've actually got a question here from Andy regarding kind of, how will the new per parcel charges affect cross-border into the EU from July? So it's a really interesting question, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that does develop as we kind of, review it. There are a few changes that have happened already, actually. So it's not just coming from July, it's coming from July in a much like broader sense. So, every country will have different, you know, charges imported from July onwards, but there are some member states that have already actually started that implementation. It's based on the duties. So with kind of the previous rules before. So post Brexit, there was an introduction of the 150 rule, whereas before below 150 euros, essentially there was no duties applicable on that order. That's now being removed, so it's going to be affected on any orders going into the EU, and they will attract duties. If you have any kind of questions specifically around, what that would look like, we could look at, delving into that conversation further, especially kind of looking at what you're shipping. Is it going to be like B2C, B2B, anything like that moving forward? Okay. Let me have a look at the other questions. Okay, we've got some frequently asked questions as well that we're going to be looking at. So we've just kind of gone through and collated what we're going to be going through. So I believe my colleague in the background is just popping them up for me. Thank you. So yeah, how do kind of the Oz and the IELTS simplify VAT reporting across multiple countries? What qualifies and what are the limits? Um, it's quite interesting because they're both for different avenues. So you've got the import one-stop shop, which allows you to import physical goods into the EU. And that is actually going back to kind of Andy's question around that 150 euros. So it's for goods below 150 euros that are held outside the EU and you can sell to EU consumers. It allows seamlessness for you to collect and remit VAT as it's just kind of one return. It's also a really good starting point, I would say, if you're not sure on kind of like markets or what market you're looking to grow or explore into. So if you're kind of considering, am I going to have a really high demand in, say, Germany, France, or is it going to be more like Poland? Am I going to be more beneficial warehousing my goods in future in any of those three countries? Why not try selling under the IELTS to begin with? And then you can see kind of where that market demand really, really sits. If you put some kind of, marketing behind that and really boost those sales within the EU, you can see a really high return on your investment with the IELTS. And it allows you a bit more kind of oversight as to what markets may be better. The OSS is slightly different. It allows you to hold stock inside the EU. So it would be more so there if you're, say, warehousing in Germany already. You then, it's a similar process where you can sell around the EU. There's just no consignment limit. So it may be more beneficial for kind of, people who have high value goods or goods that are typically an average order above 150 euros when your client base. If you're holding stock within the EU, you can then use that to sell freely. And yeah, as mentioned, it really does show, real good ideas about what market is maybe more beneficial when you're looking to kind of warehouse and hold your stock moving forward. With the practical steps that a UK or non-EU merchant should take first, so kind of looking at what would be the best route. As I've mentioned, I kind of think that it really does depend, one, on kind of what your products are, what the value of your average order looks like, and where you can see those kind of sales growing, I would say. So if you're unsure on the market or you don't want to put the investment in, then IELTS might be a really good first step if your goods below that 150 euros, because it is quite an easy, accessible kind of, registration. It allows you to normally obtain the IELTS number within like a week. So obviously there are some exceptions to that, but typically we do see the IELTS numbers approved within 3 to 5 days. So it's quite quick. If you're in a rush or you're seeing a real kind of, increase in demand for your client base, you can probably send, those goods out within the next couple of weeks and really start fulfilling that moving forward. On the flip side, if you're looking more into like marketplaces, then the VAT number would be required if you're looking to kind of hold stock, especially when you're looking at Amazon FBA Pan EU. So I think it is something to look at, where do you see yourself growing with these sales and what is going to be more beneficial in the next kind of like 2 to 3 years. Also, because you need to look at it with like longevity investment as well as obviously like short term investment and what's going to be best for the business then. So, yeah, I mean, if anyone is looking at growing their business internationally through 2026, feel free to just reach out to us after today's webinar and we can look at what kind of avenues may be most beneficial for your business moving forward. So another really interesting question, which we do get asked quite a lot, is, how do we determine when we must register VAT in each country if we store stock locally? So again, it's going to depend on kind of where you're holding your stock and what you're kind of looking at. So for example, if you're holding stock in a country, you're taxable from the first supply. You would need to be registered before you can kind of hold your stock there. So in Pan EU, for example, if you've got 4 member states that you're going to be opening with Amazon, that may be kind of France, Italy, Germany, Spain. You would need all 4 VAT numbers before you can kind of hold or move your stock over there, especially within that Pan EU program. If you're only going to be warehousing, say, in the Netherlands for own website sales, then you would need that again before you kind of move your stock across. Once your goods are inside the EU, you can then utilize that one-stop shop registration to allow kind of seamless collection and remittance of the VAT. It is going to be required for from the first sale, essentially going direct to consumer from, say, Netherlands or Germany, wherever you're holding stock, to, let's say, your consumers in, let's say it's going from Netherlands into Germany. You collect 19% VAT from your consumer and then remit that through the OSS. So yeah, hopefully that does answer the question a little bit further. And then the other thing as well is, what are penalties for late VAT registration in the EU countries, and do they apply retroactively? Each member state is different. To be completely transparent, it's always recommended to kind of have a conversation with, say, someone similar to ourselves if you are looking to scale your business further, just because it does mean if you are looking to kind of sell into the EU or you're collecting VAT, that shouldn't be done unless you're kind of VAT registered or have a route of remittance. So if you have, say, for example, sold into Germany before and you've collected VAT on that sale, or you've moved stock across and you haven't got the VAT number yet, or, for example, we've seen it quite a lot actually with Amazon over the last few years where, people have kind of moved stock over to the Amazon warehouse. They weren't aware that the VAT number needs to be obtained from the first day. And then it led to an Amazon kind of suspension from their side. So they suspended their kind of marketplace within the Seller Central account until the VAT number was approved. When you also go to then register for that, you need to declare the backdated start date. So let's just say, if I hold stock in a country and I move that across on the 1st of September, but I haven't applied for my VAT registration, I now need to declare that I started taxable activity from the 1st of September 2025. And then there may be penalties incurred on that if there's VAT to declare within those returns during that period, because within that, the way that it would work is from, say, September through to now we're towards the end of January, which I can't quite believe, but within those kind of 5 months, if I've made sales, I then have to declare that VAT that I've taken and not remitted within those 5 months. And I would likely then face penalties on top of that due to late submission and failure for compliance. So those penalties do vary per country. It's something that you can also look at. In some countries, you can do a voluntary disclosure, especially as we know, sometimes you really don't know what those kind of rules and regulations look like. So by submitting a voluntary disclosure for the backdated, it helps remove those kind of like penalties as well moving forward. So yeah, hopefully that does answer the question a bit further. But again, if you're unsure on anything like that at all, just feel free to reach out to us and we can definitely kind of look at that and look at what you need to kind of get and keep compliant moving forward. So one of the final kind of questions that we frequently get asked is, if we use Amazon Pan EU FBA, kind of which parts must still be reported via local VAT returns and which parts are moving through the OS. So with the OSS, it's actually not your responsibility to hold or file an OSS if Amazon is going to be, if your only sales channel, sorry, is through Amazon. The reason behind that is typically, especially for non-EU based businesses, that they do act as a deemed supplier. So it might be good to actually do a comparison for this one. So if we look at, say, a UK based business doing pan EU and an EU based business doing pan EU. So as a non-EU business, the UK based business would have Amazon acting as their deemed supplier. So if they were to, say, register on Germany, France, and Italy, then we will have those three kind of local returns to file. Amazon will then take care of any kind of cross-border sales, and that will be remitted through their OSS. On those local returns, you then need to file that basically what kind of sales were done. Amazon will still act as a deemed supplier, but there basically just needs to be line items on there. Whereas for the EU-based business, Amazon will not act as a deemed supplier. So they will essentially require you to hold and obtain a one-stop shop registration within the member state of your establishment. So if that's going to be for, say, Germany, then we would look at registering the German OSS. Within that German OSS, you would then remit all those sales that are going cross-border, whereas obviously that UK-based business wouldn't, because they're not having to be OSS registered. Those local returns, you would file any local sales on that, as well as obviously any kind of sale moving forward. But essentially that's where the differences would be as well. So that would be where you'd kind of need to look at moving forward. Also, I've just seen a question from Hirel. Thank you so much for obviously asking your question. It looks like it's proposed at the moment. It's stuck at a legislative stage, but we are kind of trying to look to see when we can get that confirmed. So we'll let you know as soon as that's been approved. But it looks like it is going to be approved. It's just kind of going for those final initial stages. And with that, I believe we have come towards the end of today's session. If you haven't obviously asked any questions, or you don't want to kind of comment a question, as we've discussed and mentioned previously, please do just feel free to shoot them across. I'll go through kind of the email very shortly. But before we kind of jump into that, we've got some key resources that we have available. So that's going to be the kind of top trends and the reasons why you should expand. So a bit more kind of information surrounding that. And yeah, as we've discussed, please feel free to shoot an email across to hereToHelp@simplyvat.com with any questions that you may have. And thank you again so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure. And I will be back for the next one next month, where we will be looking at the 13th directive. Thank you so much.